I've never seen a pet that doesn't have leaky gut. I treat my own pets for leaky gut. When I was an emergency critical care vet, I'm telling you, the number one thing I saw in the middle of the night was stomach or GI distress. And people were livid when they would find out that they had a $500 emergency bill and their dog had gas. It's extremely crucial in the times that we live in and the exposure that we have. There's pesticides, heavy metals, environmental toxins everywhere we look. There's all these things that are inundating the body and they're creating chronic inflammation. We have stress that's coming from us because life is so stressful, and it is actually affecting our pets. The gut is very much linked to anxiety, it's linked to worry, stress. All of that affects the gut. Hello, this is Dr. Natalie Lenoir Blackman coming back to you with the fire element, and we are going to talk just a little bit about the yang element that is contained within the fire element. So we have the heart yin element, and then we have the yang element, which is the small intestine. And as you guys know, my absolute favorite thing in the world to talk about and or to treat is the gut, because honestly, is so much of what we see clinically comes back to the gut in some way. And as Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. And in Chinese medicine, we believe the same thing. So, from both a holistic and Chinese medicine perspective, the gut is extremely important. We know that there's actually now what's called the gut brain. And so we know that it even has almost like its own mind and can really have a lot more control over the body than we ever realized. And we want to remember that in this season, it's actually common for us to see digestive issues flaring up related to either the heart and or the small intestine. So if your pet has ever had any antibiotics, steroids, vaccines, flea and tick preventatives, processed food, and or chronic stress, then your pet is likely dealing with some form of leaky gut. So as we dive into this, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the inflammatory conditions that we see today that are linked to the leaky gut issues. Allergies is at the top of the list. Of course, yeast of any kind, ear infections, autoimmune disease. In Chinese medicine, we believe that autoimmune begins in the stomach. And so we also are dealing with, we talked about anxiety, of course, digestive issues, chronic inflammation anywhere in the body. In fact, dampness in the intestinal tract can actually lead to damp B syndrome in Chinese medicine, that is also known as damp arthritis. So it can actually cause your pet to have sudden back pain or become stiff in the back end or all of a sudden develop hip pain. That's because dampness can get trapped in a joint and or in that spine. And so I do teach about leaky gut in my course on the Holistic Pet Reset. I really enjoy talking about leaky gut. I enjoy talking about toxic biofilm, how these are all connected with your pet's health almost in every aspect. But we must understand that leaky gut is leaking between the cells lining the gut. And this will actually allow food particles and or bad bacteria or yeast to escape the gut barrier and get into the bloodstream. And this can really trigger some serious allergy issues. We can see massive histamine release. And over time, it can definitely lead to mast cell tumors, because that's when the body's just been stimulated over and over and over with histamine release. And so we must remember that anything that that pet could ingest, glyphosate is extremely commonly found within the stomach. That is the chemical that everybody found out is so toxic from Roundup. So that can actually come in through the gut. We can have, as we said, the bacteria, heavy metals, yeast byproducts, food particles, inflammatory proteins. Any of those can come through a leaky gut barrier. So once that happens, the immune system just goes on high alert, and that will lead to, as we said, inflammation of all types, allergies, chewing the front paws specifically. If it's mostly within the small intestine, the right ear is going to be more affected than the left ear. But we must remember that any inflammation in the body is most often caused by leaky gut. And then in Chinese medicine, too, it is a firm belief that you cannot develop cancer unless you have leaky gut, or what we call spleen chi deficiency with damp or phlegm stagnation. So that all goes again to leaky gut, because most of the time in leaky gut, we have something called lymphangiectasia, and that's actually where the lymphatics get really congested there at the intestinal cell walls. And so if your pet has had any processed food or artificial additives or preservatives or been exposed to environmental toxins or pesticides, all of those can come through that leaky gut barrier into the bloodstream and trigger a very serious immune response. So, we want to focus on healing that gut. And of course, I created one of my favorite products, which is called Gut Punch. And that Gut Punch is designed to help heal the gut. If you want to do amino acids, L-glutamine is extremely important in healing the gut. Marshmallow root is extremely important. We can look at lots of other herbals like slippery elm is good to kind of keep the gut balanced. Of course, we want to do a really good probiotic, one that you know is actually active probiotics. You a good probiotic company. I usually say, sadly, I look to the human products, and I personally only carry pharmaceutical grade regulated supplements at my practice. And so we have several that we recommend to help restore the gut microbiome. And of course, colostrum is excellent for healing the gut. Fermented foods are really good for healing that gut and restoring a natural gut flora. We want to make sure that we get that corrected in the beginning of summer because guess what? End of summer, I call it the diarrhea and vomiting season. Actually, starting mid July, around July the 14th, is what we call the crux of summer. And that is where fire and earth converge. And if there is any excess fire or if there's any phlegm or damp, especially in that GI tract from that leaky gut, we are going to see explosive vomiting and or diarrhea. And who wants to deal with that, right? Nobody wants that on their carpet or on their rug, or you don't want to be out in public when that happens. You don't want to be having your pet on the patio and then they have this explosive diarrhea. So we want to take care of that now. Again, that's called being proactive instead of reactive. We want to get on top of healing that gut. It is extremely crucial. And I don't care. I've never seen a pet that doesn't have leaky gut. I treat my own pets for leaky gut and they don't get any chemicals or antibiotics or anything like that. It's extremely crucial in the times that we live in and the exposure that we have. There's pesticides, heavy metals, environmental toxins everywhere we look. As we talked about, the EMFs are getting cranked up. So there's all these things that are inundating the body and they're creating chronic inflammation. We have stress that's coming from us because life is so stressful and it is actually affecting our pets. That has to do with a frequency transfer. So that frequency transfer can stress out our pets, and that alone can trigger inflammation in that gut. The gut is very much linked to anxiety, it's linked to worry, stress. All of that affects the gut and how it responds and how it heals. And so we want to look at, again, detoxing the body correctly. I put that all together in my detox mini e-course. It's called the Holistic Pet Reset. It's super easy to watch and super easy to follow. I go into deeper depth on leaky gut. I talk about toxic biofilm, yeast overgrowth, and how to detox correctly. And then, of course, I've got the e-course on feeding made easy. So you can learn what to feed your pet and how to feed your pet and making sure they're eating the foods that are right for their constitution. And so once we start understanding these things and becoming more proactive, we're going to have a lot less reactive medicine. So we're going to spend less time at the emergency clinic. You're not going to have to rush in on a Friday night or a Saturday because listen, when I was an emergency critical care vet, I'm telling you, the number one thing I saw in the middle of the night was stomach or GI distress. And people were livid when they would find out that they had a $500 emergency bill and their dog had gas. Okay. So you don't want to fall in that category. We want to get that corrected now. This is the season that we want to do this in. So I'm really trying to help teach and encourage you that there is a time of year that we correct and heal the body. And so this is the fire element. This is when we take care of the heart and the small intestine. And if we can do that now, if we can heal that now, we're going to save ourselves a lot more stress when we get toward the end of the summer, mid to end of the summer, which is the damp season, and also the earth season, which is the stomach and the pancreas. So we're going to actually prevent a lot of vomiting and diarrhea from happening in that time if we focus on balancing now. So remember, if we pair proper nutrition with gut repair support, we will often see massive changes. We want to look at getting on board with these things now so that you don't have an issue later. I hope this helps your pet to live a healthier, happier, and longer life and cause you less stress.